On a cool October morning in 2004, a dusty brown bus rumbled down a narrow Texas highway, its windows barred, its passengers shackled. Among them was a man known only to prison guards and the justice system as inmate number 456219, convicted of double homicide, sentenced to die by lethal injection. His name was Elijah Kane. To most, he was a ghost, a name buried in the back pages of old newspapers, a mistake of the system, condemned by a jury, forgotten by the world. No one expected to hear from Elijah again. No one expected him to vanish. But vanish he did, mid-transfer, in the middle of nowhere, under circumstances so bizarre they would baffle law enforcement for over a decade. And what he did after his disappearance defied every expectation. Because Elijah Kane didn't just escape death row. He saved lives. He stopped crimes. He became the town's guardian angel, without anyone knowing who he really was. Until one night in 2019, when a single mistake shattered everything. This is the true story of how a convicted killer became a small town's most unlikely hero, and how the truth caught up with him in the end. Before the trial, before the death sentence, Elijah Kane was a name spoken with admiration in his Houston neighborhood, a former Army medic. He returned from Iraq in 2002 with a chest full of ribbons and eyes that never looked the same again. He opened a small auto repair shop, hired veterans, and lived a quiet life with his younger sister, Naomi. Neighbors remember him as gentle, always first to help with a flat tire, a broken fence, a scared kid, but the war had carved into him. He slept with a knife under his pillow. Loud noises made him flinch. And then, one night in 2003, everything fell apart. 2 bodies were found behind a nightclub on the east side. One was a known drug dealer. The other, a 19-year-old girl named Carla Ruiz. Both shot execution style. Surveillance footage showed a man arguing with Carla earlier that evening. Tall, built, wearing a leather jacket. The camera was grainy. The man's face was partially obscured. But Carla's friend pointed a trembling finger at a photo lineup. She chose Elijah Kane. Police raided his apartment. They found his military-issued sidearm, recently fired. Ballistics were inconclusive, but the pressure to solve the case was intense. Carla's parents were vocal. The media pounced. A veteran with a gun, a violent past, PTSD. He fit the story they needed. The trial was swift. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. On April 11th, 2004, Elijah was sentenced to death. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. But in the courtroom, his sister Naomi collapsed. "He didn't do this," she sobbed. "They're killing the wrong man." And no one listened. October 17th, 2004, 5:48 a.m. A prison transport bus carrying 7 inmates and 2 guards veered off Highway 96 near Jasper, Texas. According to official records, the bus driver swerved to avoid a deer, lost control, and the vehicle rolled into a shallow ditch. The chaos that followed lasted less than 3 minutes, but would become one of the most heavily scrutinized transport failures in the state's history. When backup arrived, they found the bus tilted sideways, 2 guards unconscious, and a hole in the back door security frame that hadn't been there before. 1 inmate was gone, Elijah Kane. What baffled authorities was how surgical the escape had been. The lock on his handcuffs had been picked. The emergency exit door had been pried open from inside, and no other inmate moved a muscle. Kane had slipped away silently into the pre-dawn woods, disappearing without a trace. A manhunt involving U.S. Marshals, helicopters, and bloodhounds covered a 30-mile radius for 10 days. Nothing. It was as if Kane had evaporated into the East Texas pines. No one saw him again for years, or so they thought. In 2010, a sleepy town called Oak Hollow, population just over 3,000, saw the arrival of a quiet stranger. He went by Eli Jackson. Tall, lean, graying at the temples, hands that knew hard work. He moved into a rundown cabin on the outskirts of town, paid 6 months' rent in cash, and kept mostly to himself. To the residents of Oak Hollow, Eli was a mystery, but not an unwelcome one. He started fixing things, broken windows, busted tractors. He never asked for payment, just nodded and moved on. He volunteered at the local food pantry. He helped rebuild the church roof after a tornado. He taught first aid to teenagers. People began to talk. Man's a saint. Doesn't say much, but he's always there when you need him. And when a fire broke out at the Hollow Pines Mobile Park in 2012, Eli kicked in 3 doors and pulled 4 people to safety before firefighters arrived. One of them was a 5-year-old girl with a heart condition. Doctor said if she'd inhaled smoke for another 60 seconds, she wouldn't have made it. Eli didn't stick around for thanks. He walked away with second-degree burns on his arms and no explanation. By then, people had stopped asking questions. Eli Jackson had become Oak Hollow's quiet hero. What they couldn't know, was that the man they trusted had once been convicted of murder, and the truth was beginning to stir again. Back in Houston, Naomi Kane never stopped believing her brother was innocent. She visited lawyers, cold-called journalists, begged Innocence Projects for help. Most doors stayed closed. But in 2015, a young investigative reporter named Kelsey Moran, researching wrongful convictions of veterans with PTSD, came across Elijah Kane's case. Something didn't sit right. The ballistics were never conclusive. The witness had recanted in 2007, buried in a footnote, never revisited. And most shocking of all, fingerprints found on Carla Ruiz's purse didn't match Kane. They had, in fact, never been identified. Kelsey began digging, and she found something strange. In 2004, a corrupt narcotics officer named Dwayne Lyles had been under quiet investigation. He'd later be convicted of planting evidence in drug cases. Lyles had been the lead detective on Elijah's case. Coincidence or conspiracy? Kelsey and Naomi formed a pact. If Elijah was still alive, they'd find him. And if he was innocent, they'd clear his name. They just didn't know he was living under their noses. In February 2019, Oak Hollow faced its worst nightmare. A man named Richard Garrison, a drifter with a long rap sheet, broke into the home of a local teacher, Claire Foster. He had a knife. Her 10-year-old son, Mason, hid in the closet and called 911. Eli Jackson was walking by when he heard the scream. He didn't wait. He burst through the back door, tackled Garrison, and disarmed him. By the time police arrived, Eli had subdued the intruder and calmed Mason down. Claire Foster called him a guardian angel. The local news called him a hero. But one photo changed everything. A sheriff's deputy snapped a picture of Eli for the paper. Burn marks visible on his forearms, a faded army tattoo on his wrist. When Kelsey Moran saw the article, her coffee cup slipped from her hand. It was him, Elijah Kane, alive. Kelsey Moran didn't hesitate. She drove to Oak Hollow the next morning, camera and recorder in tow. But what she found was not what she expected. The man who opened the cabin door wasn't a fugitive or a ghost. He was older, worn, a face that had seen too much. His voice was calm, resigned. "You found me," he said. "Took you long enough." He invited her in. For the next 2 hours, Elijah Kane told her everything. The botched transfer, the escape, the years spent in hiding. But what haunted him most wasn't prison. It was the truth he never got to say. "I didn't kill Carla," he said, tears in his eyes. "But I did run, because no one would have believed me." He told her about the real killer, someone Carla had feared, a man named Andre Silva, a mid-level enforcer tied to a gang Kane had encountered through his auto shop. Carla had tried to cut ties, and it got her killed. Kane had argued with her that night. Yes, trying to convince her to go to the police. That argument had sealed his fate. Silva disappeared shortly after the murder. No one had followed that lead. Kelsey left with a copy of Elijah's military records, letters from Carla found his belongings, and a shaky video confession recorded on her phone. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Elijah said. "Just the truth." Naomi cried when Kelsey called. Her brother was alive, but his time was running out, because after the newspaper photo ran, someone else recognized him too. Sheriff Tom Deakins had been in Oak Hollow for 23 years. He liked Eli Jackson, but something about the case nagged at him. So he got an anonymous call linking Eli to a convicted killer on the run. He ran the prints. The match came back in seconds. Elijah Kane escaped death row. armed and dangerous. Deacons didn't tell anyone, not yet. He drove out to the cabin himself. When he arrived, Kane was sitting on the porch, as if he knew. "You came to take me in?" Kane asked quietly. "I have to," Deacons replied, handcuffs in hand. "You know that." Kane stood, shoulders straight. "Just promise me you'll listen. Don't let them shut this down before the truth comes out." Deacons nodded. "You have my word." The next morning, the headline hit every major outlet in Texas. Escaped death row inmate found living as town hero. Public opinion exploded. Some called for his immediate return to death row. Others, especially in Oak Hollow, rallied to his defense. "He saved my son," Claire Foster told reporters. "You don't lock up a man like that. You thank him." And as Kelsey's investigation went public, pressure mounted. The wrongful conviction unit reopened Kane's case. A hearing was scheduled. For the first time in 15 years, Elijah Kane would have a real shot at justice. April 2020, Harris County Courthouse. The same courtroom where Elijah was once sentenced to die. But this time, he wasn't the one on trial. His conviction was. Kelsey presented new evidence. Carla's letters, the retracted eyewitness testimony, fingerprints unmatched Kane, and a pattern of misconduct tied to Detective Dwayne Lyles, who was now serving time himself. But the most powerful moment came when Naomi took the stand. She read aloud from Elijah's military file. She read Carla's letters, too. Heartbreaking words from a scared girl trying to escape a violent world. And finally, the court played Elijah's own words, recorded from Kelsey's phone. "I ran because I didn't believe anyone would help me. But now, I'd rather die with the truth out there than live with the lie." When the judge ruled the conviction overturned, there were gasps, cheers, tears. But Elijah didn't smile. He only looked at Naomi. "I told you I didn't do it," he whispered. Epilogue: the man who stayed. After the ruling, the DA declined to re-prosecute. Elijah Kane was free. Technically, he was still guilty of escaping prison. But the governor issued a rare pardon in recognition of his role in saving lives and exposing corruption. Kane had offers, interviews, book deals, even a movie option. He declined them all. He returned to Oak Hollow, not as a mystery man this time, but as himself. He rebuilt homes after the next hurricane. He mentored troubled teens. He ran a small workshop out of his garage and still walked the woods every morning at sunrise. People would stop and ask him why he stayed. His answer was always the same: "Because this town saved me to."